When homeless veteran Thomas Walker gives his last $20 to help a stranded woman and her sick child get to the hospital, he expects nothing in return. But the woman he helped isn't who she appears to be, and what happens in the following days will restore your faith in humanity and prove that kindness is never wasted, even when you have nothing left to give. Thomas Walker counted the crumpled bills one more time, even though he knew the total wouldn't change. $23. That's what stood between him and absolute zero. $23 that had taken him 4 days of panhandling at the freeway exit to accumulate. $23 that would need to stretch until he could figure out his next move. He sat on his usual bench in Pioneer Square, Seattle's historic district that had become home to dozens of people like him, invisible to most, avoided by many, acknowledged by few. His worldly possessions fit into a worn military duffel bag, 2 changes of clothes, a tattered sleeping bag, a water bottle, some basic toiletries, and the folded American flag that had draped his best friend's coffin 12 years ago. Thomas was 52 years old, but he looked closer to 70. The streets had a way of aging you, the stress, the malnutrition, the sleepless nights, the constant vigilance needed to stay safe. His salt and pepper beard was scraggly, his clothes stained and worn, his shoes held together more by duct tape than original stitching. But his eyes still held something. Not hope exactly. Hope was a luxury he'd given up somewhere between losing his job, losing his apartment, and losing his dignity. But there was still humanity there, still decency, still the core of who Staff Sergeant Thomas Walker had been before Afghanistan, before the IED that killed his squad, before the PTSD and nightmares that made holding down a job impossible, before the cascade of failures that led him here. The evening was cooling down, and Thomas was considering where he'd sleep tonight. The shelter on 3rd Avenue filled up early, and he'd been too late yesterday. There was an alcove behind the old theater that was relatively safe, or the heating vent near the library if he could get there before Rodriguez claimed it. That's when he heard the crying. Not unusual in this neighborhood, there was often crying, shouting, chaos. Thomas had learned to tune most of it out, but this was different. This was a child crying, the kind of desperate, painful crying that cut through all the urban noise. He looked up. A young woman, mid-30s maybe, was standing near the bus stop, a small boy clutched in her arms. The child was maybe 5 or 6, and even from a distance, Thomas could see he wasn't right. The kid's breathing was labored, his face flushed and sweaty. The woman was on her phone, her voice rising in panic. "Please, I just need $25 to get to Children's Hospital. My card isn't working, I don't know what's wrong with it, and my son can't breathe properly. Please, I'll pay you back tomorrow, I promise." Whoever was on the other end of the line apparently said no because the woman's face crumpled. She tried another number, then another. Each time, the response seemed to be the same. Thomas watched several people walk past her. A businessman in an expensive suit, a group of college students laughing at something on their phones, a couple holding shopping bags from high-end stores. No one stopped. The woman was sobbing now, the child's breathing getting worse. She looked around desperately, as if the universe might suddenly produce a solution. Thomas looked down at his $23, his last $23, his food for the next week, his safety net, the difference between uncomfortable and desperate. He thought about his own son, who would be about 17 now. Thomas hadn't seen him in 8 years. His ex-wife had made sure of that when the PTSD got bad and he'd started drinking. "You're not safe around him," she'd said. Maybe she was right. Probably she was right. But if his son were in trouble, if he were struggling to breathe and needed help. Thomas stood up. His knees cracked, sleeping on concrete did that. He shouldered his duffel bag and walked toward the woman. She saw him coming and instinctively clutched her child closer. Thomas was used to that reaction. When you looked like he did, people assumed the worst. He stopped a respectful distance away. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but overhear. Your son needs to get to the hospital." She looked at him warily, taking in his appearance, clearly trying to decide if he was a threat. "Yes. My card isn't working and I don't have cash, and the bus fare to Children's is $25, Thomas finished. "I know, it's the express route plus the transfer. I've called everyone I know. No one can help right now. They're all at work or—" Her voice broke. "He has asthma. This is bad. This is really bad. I need to get him to the hospital." Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out his money. He counted out $20, leaving himself with $3, and held it out to her. "This is 20. It's all I've got. The driver might let you slide on the extra 5 if you explain the situation. If not, I've got 3 more here." "I can't take your money," she said automatically, but her eyes were on the bills. "You need it. Your son needs it more." Thomas pressed the 20 into her hand. "Go, get him help, that's what matters. I'll pay you back. I swear I'll come back tomorrow and—" "Don't worry about it. Just take care of your boy." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much. I don't thank you." She hurried toward the bus stop, the child still wheezing in her arms. Thomas watched them board the express bus, watched the woman show the driver the money and explain something, watched the driver nod and wave her on. The bus pulled away. Thomas sat back down on his bench, his 3 remaining dollars feeling impossibly light in his pocket. He'd figure something out. He always did. And that kid needed help more than he needed dinner tomorrow. A man sitting on the opposite bench, another regular Thomas recognized but didn't know, shook his head. "You're a fool, Walker. That was probably a scam. She's probably not even going to the hospital." Thomas shrugged. "Maybe, but what if it wasn't? What if that kid really couldn't breathe? Then it's her problem, not yours. You barely got enough to feed yourself." "I've gone hungry before. I'll manage." Thomas pulled his jacket tighter against the cooling air. "Besides, I've been that mother. Different circumstances, but I've been the person desperately needing help while everyone walks by. Somebody's got to stop." The other man grunted and went back to his own thoughts. Thomas leaned his head against the bench and closed his eyes. He was tired, so damn tired, not just physically, though that too, but tired of being invisible, tired of the looks, tired of the grinding, daily struggle just to survive. But he wasn't tired of being human, wasn't tired of doing the right thing. That was the one part of himself he'd managed to hold onto through everything else, the part that still cared, that still helped, that still saw other people's pain and couldn't just walk away. Even if it meant he'd go hungry. Even if that woman never came back. Even if it was all for nothing. At least he'd tried. Thomas didn't think about the woman or her son again that night. He was too busy trying to survive. With only $3 to his name, he bought a single burger from the dollar menu and saved the rest. The shelter was full, so he ended up in the alcove behind the theater, cold but relatively dry. He didn't sleep much. He never did. The nightmares saw to that. The next day was a Sunday, which meant fewer people downtown and fewer opportunities to panhandle. Thomas spent most of the day at the library. It was warm, free, and no one bothered you if you pretended to read. He was genuinely reading, actually. A Tom Clancy novel someone had left behind, when a librarian approached him. "Sir, there's someone at the front desk asking for you." Thomas looked up confused. "Asking for me by name?" "She said she's looking for Thomas Walker, the homeless veteran who sits in Pioneer Square." Thomas's heart did a strange little jump. The woman from yesterday, she'd actually come back. He followed the librarian to the front desk, where the young woman from the bus stop was waiting. She looked completely different in the daylight, well-rested, neatly dressed in slacks and a blazer, professional. Her son was with her, looking healthy and energetic, playing with a toy car. "Mr. Walker," she extended her hand. "I'm Allison Chen. We met yesterday at the bus stop." Thomas shook her hand, very aware of how dirty his own must be. "Is your son okay?" "He's perfect, thanks to you. They got him on a nebulizer at the ER and his breathing stabilized. It was scary, but he's fine now." She paused. "I came to pay you back. You gave me $20. I want to give you 40. "That's not necessary, ma'am. I'm just glad your boy is okay." "Please, I insist." She held out two $20 bills. Thomas hesitated, then took them. $40 meant food for more than a week. It meant a night or two at the cheap motel on Aurora where you could shower and feel human again. It meant survival. "Thank you," he said quietly. "No, thank you." Allison's eyes were intense. "Mr. Walker, can I ask you something? Why did you help me yesterday?" Thomas blinked. "Why wouldn't I?" "You gave me your last $20. Someone told me. I asked around about you after I found out which library you visit. They said you've been homeless for years. That money was everything to you. Why give it to a stranger?" "Your son needed help." "But you didn't know me. I could have been lying. I could have been scamming you." Thomas smiled slightly. "Could have been. But what if you weren't? What if I walked away and your boy didn't get help? I'd have $20 and a guilty conscience. This way, I've got a clear conscience and a good story." Allison studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Walker, what did you do before you ended up on the streets?" "I was in the Army. Staff Sergeant, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 tour in Afghanistan." "What happened?" Thomas looked away. "IED took out most of my squad. I survived. Physically, anyway, mentally." He tapped his temple. "PTSD, nightmares, couldn't hold down jobs, started drinking, lost my family, lost everything else soon after." "I'm sorry." "It is what it is." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to people actually listening to his story. Most people looked away when they saw the homeless. This woman was actually seeing him. "Mr. Walker, Thomas, if I may, I'd like to help you, more than just paying you back." "Ma'am, you don't owe me anything." "Please hear me out." Allison glanced at her son, who was still playing happily, then back to Thomas. "I'm the director of operations at Chen Medical Technologies. We're a medical device company, about 300 employees. We've been looking to start a veterans hearing initiative, but we've been struggling to figure out how to really make an impact, not just check a corporate social responsibility box." Thomas felt his guard going up. He'd heard this before. People who wanted to help, but really just wanted to feel good about themselves. "What I'm proposing is this," Allison continued. "Let me connect you with our HR department. We have several positions that might be suitable: warehouse, facilities, even security. Nothing requires advanced education, but they're real jobs with real pay and real benefits, including mental health support and counseling specifically for veterans with PTSD." "Ma'am, I know what you're thinking. Here's another do-gooder who wants to feel charitable. But Thomas, I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because yesterday, when you had nothing, you gave everything to help my son. That's the kind of character I want in my company. That's the kind of person I want on my team." Thomas felt his throat tighten. "I appreciate the thought, but I don't think I'm ready. I haven't worked in years. I don't have clean clothes for an interview. I probably couldn't pass a drug test." He hadn't done drugs in months, but the remnants might still be in his system. "I'm not what you need." "Me decide what I need." Allison's voice was firm but kind. "Here's what I'm proposing. Give me 1 week. 1 week to see if we can make this work. I'll arrange for temporary housing. We have corporate apartments for traveling executives. One is empty right now. I'll get you set up with our employee assistance program, including counseling. I'll have HR work with you on resume building and interview prep. After 1 week, we'll sit down and honestly assess if this is viable for both of us. If it's not, no hard feelings, and you'll have had a warm bed and good food for a week. If it is," she smiled, "well, then maybe we both get something good out of this." Thomas wanted to say no. Pride, shame, fear of failure, They all screamed at him to walk away, to not set himself up for disappointment. But a small voice in the back of his head, the voice that sounded like his drill sergeant from basic training, said, "What do you have to lose, Walker? You've got $40 and a duffel bag. She's offering you a chance. Take it." 1 week, Thomas heard himself say, but if it doesn't work out, then you walk away with a week of good meals and no obligations. Deal. Thomas took a deep breath. Deal. The week that followed was one of the strangest of Thomas's life. Allison arranged everything with ruthless efficiency. By that evening, Thomas was installed in a furnished corporate apartment in Redmond, a one-bedroom with a full kitchen, a comfortable bed, and a bathroom with water pressure that felt like a miracle. The first thing he did was take a 2-hour shower. Then he cried for about 20 minutes, overwhelmed by the simple luxury of hot water and privacy. Then he slept for 14 hours straight in an actual bed. The next morning, Allison sent a car to take him to the company's headquarters. He met with HR, a kind woman named Patricia who didn't judge, didn't pity, just processed paperwork and asked practical questions. Then he met with the employee assistance counselor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, a psychologist who specialized in veteran trauma. "I'm not here to fix you in a week, Thomas," she said during their first session, "but I can help you start accessing resources you should have been getting all along. VA benefits, PTSD treatment, support groups. The fact that you ended up homeless is a failure of our system, not a failure of you." Those words, "not a failure of you," hit Thomas harder than he expected. Over the week, he met with a job coach who helped him craft a resume that highlighted his military skills in ways civilian employers would understand: leadership, crisis management, logistics coordination, ability to perform under pressure. He toured the facilities and met potential supervisors. The security director, himself a former Marine, looked at Thomas's record and said, "Rangers, huh? We could use someone who actually knows what security means instead of these rent-a-cops who sleep through their shifts." Thomas actually laughed for the first time in months. On day 5, he had his official interview for a security supervisor position. On day 6, he was offered the job: $48,000 per year, full benefits, 401k matching, and 4 weeks paid vacation. On day 7, Thomas sat in Allison's office, still somewhat stunned. "I don't understand why you're doing this," he said. "It's more than paying back $20. You barely know me." Allison looked at him seriously. "Thomas, do you know what I was doing at that bus stop last Thursday?" "Getting your son to the hospital." "Yes, but do you know why I was at a bus stop instead of in my car?" Thomas shook his head. "I was testing something." Allison leaned back in her chair. "My company is profitable. I have money, resources, a comfortable life, but I've been feeling disconnected from the community we serve. So I decided to spend one day living like someone who's struggling. I left my car at home, took public transit, carried only the cash someone on minimum wage might have." She smiled sadly. "It was supposed to be an experiment in empathy. Then my son had a real asthma attack, my bank app genuinely crashed at the worst moment, and suddenly it wasn't an experiment anymore. It was real, and I was terrified. I called everyone I knew," she continued. "Friends, family, colleagues. Everyone was busy or didn't answer or couldn't help immediately. I watched dozens of people, wealthy people, people who could have easily helped, walk right past me. And then you stopped. A man who had every reason not to help, who had nothing to spare, whose society has completely failed. You're the one who helped." Thomas didn't know what to say. "You taught me something important, Thomas. Wealth isn't just about money, it's about generosity of spirit, and you're the wealthiest person I've met in a long time." Allison stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome to Chen Medical Technologies, officially." Thomas shook her hand, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't, My son's life might have depended on you last week. Now I'm betting my company's security on you. I think that's a pretty safe bet. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Thomas struggled with the adjustment at first. The first week on the job, he had a panic attack when a loud machine backfired near the loading dock. The sound too close to gunfire, to explosions, to memories he'd rather forget. His supervisor found him hyperventilating in the stairwell and quietly called Dr. Martinez, who talked him through it and adjusted his therapy schedule. The nightmares didn't stop just because he had a bed now. Some nights, Thomas woke up screaming, certain he was back in Afghanistan, certain his team was dying around him. But slowly, so slowly, things got better. He started seeing Dr. Martinez twice a week. He joined a veteran support group. He got properly medicated for his PTSD, something he should have done years ago but couldn't afford. He was good at his job, really good. Within a month, he'd reorganized the entire security protocol, identified 3 significant vulnerabilities, and trained the staff to be actually effective instead of just present. The other veterans at Chen Medical gravitated toward him. Allison's hearing initiative expanded, and Thomas became an unofficial mentor to newly hired vets, helping them navigate the transition from military to civilian life, from homelessness to stability. 3 months into his job, Thomas got a call from his ex-wife. "Tom," Rachel's voice was tentative, I heard you got a job, that you're doing better." "Yeah," Thomas's heart was pounding. "Yeah, I'm doing okay. How did you?" "Your VA counselor reached out. She said you're in treatment, that you've been sober for 4 months, that you're working. I thought, maybe you'd like to see Ben, if you're ready." Thomas couldn't speak for a moment. Ben, his son, the boy he hadn't seen in 8 years. "I'm ready," he managed. "God, Rachel, I'm so ready. I'll need to prepare him. It's been a long time. He's 17 now and—" "I know, I understand. Whatever you need, just thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance." The reunion happened 2 weeks later in a neutral location, a park bench, appropriately enough. Ben was tall now, almost a man, with Thomas's eyes and Rachel's smile. It was awkward at first, painful. There was so much lost time, so much hurt. But they talked. About school, about college plans, about Ben's interest in engineering. And slowly, tentatively, they began rebuilding a connection that Thomas had thought was lost forever. It wasn't perfect, it wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. 6 months after giving away his last $20, Thomas stood in front of 200 Chen medical employees at the company's quarterly meeting. Allison had asked him to speak about the Veterans Hearing Initiative, which had now brought on 23 homeless veterans, with 15 more in the pipeline. Thomas was nervous. Public speaking had never been his thing, but he'd learned that the story mattered, that people needed to hear it. "6 months ago," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "I was homeless. I slept on benches, in alcoves, wherever I could find shelter. I had $23 to my name. And I didn't know where my next meal was coming from." The room was silent, everyone listening. "I gave 20 of those dollars to a stranger whose child was sick. I didn't expect anything in return. I just knew that kid needed help, and I had the ability, barely, to provide it." He looked at Allison, who was sitting in the front row with her son. The boy waved at him. Thomas smiled. "What I didn't know was that small act of kindness would change my entire life. That the woman I helped would see past what I looked like and see who I actually was. That she'd offer me not charity but opportunity. A chance to prove myself. A chance to be human again." Thomas paused, collecting his thoughts. "There are thousands of veterans like me out there. People who served their country, who gave everything and who fell through the cracks when they came home. People who society looks past, walks around, pretends not to see. But they're still people. They still have value. They still have something to contribute." He gestured around the room. "This company has given 23 of us a second chance. 23 families now have stable housing. 23 veterans are getting the mental health treatment they should have been getting all along. 23 people who were invisible are now seen. His voice got stronger. But more than that, this company has shown that doing good isn't just about feeling good. Every veteran we've hired has been an asset. We work hard. We're loyal. We understand teamwork and sacrifice. We're not charity cases. We're valuable employees who just needed someone to take a chance on us. Thomas locked eyes with various people around the room, fellow veterans who nodded in understanding, regular employees who'd become friends, executives who'd supported the initiative. "I'm standing here today not because I was lucky," Thomas said, "but because one person chose to see me as human. One person chose to look past the surface and recognize potential. And that's the lesson I want to leave you with. Kindness isn't weakness. Generosity isn't naive. And sometimes, the person who looks like they have nothing to offer might be exactly what you need." The applause started slowly, then built until the entire room was standing. Thomas saw Allison wipe tears from her eyes. He saw Ben, his son, who'd come to watch standing in the back, clapping hard with a huge grin on his face. He saw Dr. Martinez, who'd helped him through panic attacks and nightmares, beaming with pride. And for the first time in more than a decade, Thomas Walker felt like he was home. A year after that day at the bus stop, Thomas sat in his new apartment, a real apartment he was renting himself, paid for with his own salary from his recent promotion to director of security. He just finished a video call with Ben, who was now in his first semester of college studying mechanical engineering. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real and growing stronger every week. On his coffee table was a framed photo, Thomas in his security uniform, standing with the 23 veterans who'd been hired through the initiative. They looked proud, professional, visible. His phone buzzed. A text from Allison. "Foundation meeting tomorrow at 10. We're approving funding for the new Veterans Housing Program. Your input needed." Thomas had been promoted again 3 months ago. In addition to his security role, he now helped run the Chen Medical Foundation's Veterans Outreach Program. They were planning to build transitional housing specifically for homeless veterans, with wraparound services for mental health, job training, and family reunification. It was exactly the kind of program Thomas wished had existed when he needed it. He texted back, "I'll be there." Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the document he'd been working on, a proposal for expanding the program to other companies in the Seattle area. If Chen Medical could successfully hire and support homeless veterans, why couldn't others? There was a knock at his door. Thomas opened it to find his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, holding a plate of cookies. "I made too many," she said with a wink that suggested she absolutely had not made too many. "Thought you might want some." "You're too kind, Mrs. Patterson." Thomas took the plate gratefully. "You're the kind one, young man. My grandson told me about that talk you gave at the high school last week, about resilience and second chances. He said it really impacted him." "Just trying to pay it forward, ma'am." "Well, keep it up. The world needs more people like you." After she left, Thomas sat back down with a cookie and thought about that phrase, "people like you." A year ago, people like him meant the homeless, the forgotten, the invisible ones society stepped over on their way to somewhere more important. Now it meant something different. It meant people who'd been broken and put themselves back together, people who'd been given nothing and learned to give everything, people who understood that wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in compassion. Thomas's phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He answered. "Is this Thomas Walker?" A young man's voice, nervous. "Yes, this is Thomas. My name is Marcus. I'm a veteran. I've been homeless for 6 months. Someone at the VA told me to call you, said you might be able to help." Thomas felt his heart expand. This was it. This was the ripple effect Allison always talked about. One act of kindness leading to another, spreading outward in ways you could never predict. "Marcus," Thomas said warmly, "I'm really glad you called. Tell me your story. Let's see what we can do." As Marcus began talking, Thomas opened a new document on his laptop and started taking notes. Resources needed, skills to highlight, potential positions, next steps. He was good at this now. Good at seeing potential where others saw problems. Good at recognizing that everyone deserved a second chance because he'd gotten one and refused to take it for granted. That night, after he'd spent an hour on the phone with Marcus and connected him with Chen Medical's HR department, Thomas pulled out the one item he'd kept from his homeless days, the folded American flag from his friend's funeral. He spread it out carefully on his dining table and ran his fingers over the fabric. "I hope I'm making you proud, Danny," Thomas whispered to his long-dead friend. "I hope this is what you would have wanted, for me to keep going, to keep helping, to make something meaningful out of all the pain." The flag didn't answer, of course, but Thomas felt a sense of peace settle over him anyway. He'd been given $23 and had given away 20 of them to a stranger. That act had saved a child's life and, unexpectedly, had saved his own. Now he spent his days making sure other veterans got the same chance, the chance to be seen, to be valued, to be brought back into the community they'd once served. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the life he'd expected. But it was a good life, a meaningful life, a life that mattered. And it had all started with $20 and a choice to help someone, even when he had nothing left to give. Thomas refolded the flag carefully and placed it back in its place of honor on his bookshelf. Tomorrow he'd help Marcus. Next week he'd approve funding for the housing program. Next month he'd speak at another high school, telling another group of kids that no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back up. But tonight he was just going to sit in his apartment, his home, and be grateful. Grateful for Allison's kindness. Grateful for Dr. Martinez's expertise. Grateful for his son's forgiveness. Grateful for his colleagues' support. Grateful for every single person who'd helped him when he needed it most. And grateful for that moment a year ago when he'd made a choice. The choice to see someone else's need as more important than his own comfort. The choice to give when he had nothing. The choice to remain human when the world had tried to make him invisible. That choice had changed everything.